When it comes to listing the most important games of all time, Square Enix is going to have quite a few entries. Dragon Quest I, ActRaiser, Chrono Trigger, 3D World Runner. But there's no denying that the stamp they'll never outstamp is Final Fantasy VII. There was nothing like Final Fantasy VII to this point. It was the most immersive RPG with its fleshed out world, 3D graphics, contemporary themes, CD quality music, full motion video, snowboarding, motorbiking, Yuffie, plot twist, Sid, evil corporations, Moogle minigame, cat Sith, airships, eco-terrorism, Tifa, 3D World Runner? Oh wait, fuck, that wasn't there. I'm sorry, that's a lie. This cemented Final Fantasy as the premier JRPG to the world, and made people buy the PS1. Even those that didn't know what an RPG was wanted to try it. Hell, it's the only game to never make it off of GameFAQ's Top 100 Games list. Of any games from that era that has not stood time that well, Final Fantasy VII has stood up the best. Hell, I didn't even play it until 2011, and it's still my favorite Final Fantasy.
You're too good for this world.
Mind you, that was immediately after being disappointed by 13, but that series gives me a PTSD we don't need to go over anymore. The point I'm trying to say is that Square took a big fucking risk by what I mentioned before and by moving to Sony's PlayStation after being solely on Nintendo for the past 2 generations. It led to Final Fantasy VII being the most expensive game to develop until Shenmue, which still didn't beat it once you factor in marketing. This really was an all-hands-on-deck project, besides the people on the side doing Final Fantasy Tactics and the ball-fuckeries of the Toballeries variety. I also want to clarify that this is literally every ending in Tobal number 1. So Final Fantasy is now the biggest name in RPGs. Square does 3.5 more main games. They already mentioned Tactics, which revolutionized tactics games. They got my homie Crystal Chronicles that I'll certainly grab a remaster of so my GCN GBA connector cables can finally connect her to the trash. And then, somewhere during 12's development, they decided to make the side project Compilation of Final Fantasy VII to expand on its world. There was a lot of reasons it made sense. In comparison to Final Fantasy IV, 6, or 9, there was a lot they could explore. I'd still consider 10-2 the true catalyst for Final Fantasy sequels and old idea teat-suckling, but I went over that in my Lightning Returns video and I don't want to go too deep here. The compilation's goal was to advance the world outside of the original game's story, and in many ways, it was building up towards Crisis Core on the PSP, specifically with Before Crisis, The Last Order OVA, and some bits of Advent Children. I don't want to think about Dirge, and neither did the developers. It was undoubtedly successful because Zack went from almost nobody to making all the ladies gungaga. But what flipped the flaps on gamers even more was this 2005 PS3 tech demo. People lost their fucking shit at this. Many people gained a newfound interest for an HD remake of Final Fantasy VII. And for perspective, the modern remake's shitbag was barely even a concept at this point. The furthest we'd seen a remake go at the time was Pokemon Fire Red or maybe a Twin Snakes if they were feeling ambitious. This looked as though Square was about to push the boundary with a remake of potentially the most influential game ever made. Then everyone realized that big fucking all-caps tech demo written right there and most people just went along their way. Sure, people would talk about a Final Fantasy VII remake a lot, but it quickly took a nice seat next to Kingdom Hearts 3, Duke Nukem Forever, Shenmue 3, and Half-Life 3. However, just like every game on that fucking list, here we fucking are with it in my hands. Sort of. I'd classify this game closer to a reimagining or even a sequel before calling this a remake, because there is a lot that's changed. The original Final Fantasy VII did not need a replacement, so that's not what we get. Instead, we're giving a remaking of Final Fantasy VII. So that's a wild fucking claim, and I'm gonna have to substantiate that with a lot of stuff, aren't I? So first thing about that, this is not a remake of Final Fantasy VII. Instead, it's an adaptation of the Midgar portion from Final Fantasy VII, which if you've played that, you know that's only about 5 or 6 hours long. You might think that this is a really short $60 game, but they went ahead and stretched this out to a good 40 or so hours if you do about half the side stuff. And honestly, there's some bits that are expanded on so beautifully that redoing them in the original feels lacking now. But then there's some other additions that bring me a large order of what the fuck with extra how the fuck sauce and a who the fuck drink to go with it.
Don't mind if I do!
Alright, so this is the part when I'm gonna start just spoiling fucking everything. I mean, this game, the original, other compilation bullshit. And here's the thing, I know it's 2020 and not everyone has played the original FF7, but it's also readily available on literally every platform for $20 or less. And as far as Midgar goes, you can blaze through that in a day after work or school. Although Remake doesn't pull its punches with referencing things that happened post-Midgar in one way or the other. So keep that in mind as I go forth. Because here's the thing, Final Fantasy VII Remake's story is a very fucking difficult topic. I know that sounds odd to say about a remake of a story that's made its way to the cultural thought space to a similar degree as Star Wars or Harry Potter, but that's the reason for the difficulty. Because let's be real, if you're over the age of 20 and don't know that Aerith dies at this point, then you deserve a one-wing clap and an all-expense-paid visit from the Thai ladyboy of your choosing. Nice job, buddy. Look, I'm not saying you should skip out on the game since people have spoiled it for you. Knowing Darth Vader is Luke's father doesn't ruin Star Wars. It just means that there's a key artistic moment from 1980 you weren't there for. I'm sure people are gonna look back at the Marvel movies 20 years from now and will see them similarly. I'm introducing this concept now not to defend changes made to the story of Final Fantasy VII or expose the genius behind George Lucas special editions.
Jar Jar is a key to all this.
But because the final 2 hours of Final Fantasy VII Remake is one giant moment that will more than likely make it into the cultural zeitgeist by the end of this absolute glitch of a year that is 2020. Before I finished the game, I thought this video was going to be a lot more about just the changes from the original game, but I realized that does not do this work justice. Because in actuality, 7R has 2 journeys running through it. The one made by the original Final Fantasy VII, and the one new to 7 Remake. I personally think both are poignant and well told, if not blended together as well as chili made in a northern state, but the new one also requires a certain amount of interpretation from the player. That's not to say the original Final Fantasy VII story was straightforward. In fact, the severe amount of interpretation needed is one of the reasons I think it stayed relevant as opposed to contemporaries, like Wacky Guns, Breathy Burns 4, or even the other PS1 not-so Final Fantasies. And I fucking hope you're ready to interpret, because that's gonna be some Hideki Anno type shit at us near the end. Alright, now if I were to pinpoint the exact moment where storytelling in 7R changes, probably be right about here, 33 minutes and 35 seconds into my first recording, right before the first boss. It's at this point that the relationship between the player and Cloud is made a lot more obvious. So in the original game, while we did play as Cloud, it was more of an omniscient type of role. We weren't seeing the game through the eyes of Cloud's strife, we were just controlling him to get where he had to be and saw how he reacted. For example, at this exact same moment in the original game, we just see Cloud do a little seizure, stands up, and then he goes about the game. However, in Remake, we see what Cloud's seizure is. We're much closer to a first-person perspective with Cloud. That's not to say Cloud's some self-insert who gives a fuck now. No, Cloud's still the same antisocial fucking dip you might remember him as. In fact, Cloud's personality in this is one of the best fucking parts of the whole game.
Nailed it, I know, thank you, moving on.
When Advent Children and Kingdom Hearts were at their height, a lot of people were a little upset with how much of a fucking piss baby Cloud were in those two things.
I'll get him.
I personally didn't have too big of a deal, because let's remember, Cloud was going through some fucking shit. But the quality that made us want to follow him was also missing, and that was his poor social skills. In Advent Children and Kingdom Hearts, whenever Cloud would shrug someone off, it always seemed as though he very much meant it. In Final Fantasy VII Remake, sure, Cloud just wants to talk to someone to get his job done and then get paid, get the fuck out, but there's other times where he's just being a little idiot.
So, Cloud, what's your favorite flower?
They're all the same to me.
Huh. You sure you want to say that to a florist?
Any fucking time he's in the same room as Tifa, they act like high school kids that only learned abstinence only. And while I make fun of it, my heart was fucking squealing like crazy every fucking scene. That's not to say Cloud's awkward with literally everyone, it's just because he, wants to with Tifa. For example, he's straightforward and blunt with Jessie. That's because every fucking time Jessie talks to him, she should be receiving an HR complaint. I mean, sure, maybe Barrett doesn't care, but also in this game, we get to learn that Avalanche is a whole fucking organization. So this is one of the concepts in the game that was stolen from the compilation. So in Final Fantasy VII Before Crisis, which was, you know, a mobile phone game that none of you have fucking played, it was shown that Avalanche wasn't just Barrett's group, but there was also a whole fucking other thing of them that was kind of cult-like. Mind you, their cultiness kind of came from the fact that you were playing as the Turks, who are obviously on the other side of them, so yeah, they're gonna look like the bad guys. I won't go too much into that because only recently have I been playing Before Crisis after I learned about a fan remake by user Richter Wilker, and I probably won't finish it until I'm just about done with this video. If y'all are diehard Final Fantasy fans, I would recommend trying it, but know that it's very RPG makery. Although that's not to say that Jessie is purely horny, she does have a lot of other aspects to her character that were not in the original at all. That actually goes for all 3 of the Avalanche members from Barrett's group. They mostly get their development during Chapter 4, which is when we go on a whole new quest to the upper plate of Sector 7 for Jessie to get some better bomb parts. And what's kind of cool about this is that it's actually a follow-through of a single throwaway line from the original game that just didn't go anywhere. Now, depending on who you ask, this entire chapter can be seen as either pointless padding or intrinsic world building, but I'd fall a bit more into the latter. This is the one where we first learn about all the other Avalanche groups, and it's also where we get to see what middle-upper class Midgar looks like. Barrett's Avalanche fights to save the planet and spread inequality for the people of Midgar, and while the original showed the scummy underbelly of the pizza pie that is Midgar pretty well, we had very few clue-ins on the mozzarella and pepperonis on the upper side, and what we find is mostly reminiscent of American cities. There's a mix of newer and older homes, there's a lot of parking lots that kids are probably smoking in, a fuck ton of cats running around, and some fences I really want to jump over. As well as that, all the homes conform with each other in a very fucking Karen design element I hate in neighborhoods. But who knows, maybe it's done so I have more of a desire to side with Avalanche. I grew up in a city with literally 0 zoning laws where the porn store has a big fucking sign on the freeway, so what the fuck do I know? To further Jessie's development again, everyone gets to go have pizza with her mom, who reveals a lot about her story, and then Biggs and Wedge divulge some more info to Cloud about her hopes and dreams of returning to life as an actress. It gives us a hint that maybe she's not as mentally sound as she lets on. Or maybe she is just mentally unsound and also really fucking horny.
I might be falling after all. Psych?
But speaking of Biggs and Wedge, whoo boy, oh man, they ain't just some fucking Star Wars reference anymore. So yeah, Wedge is still your typical funny fat man who's not Gabriel Iglesias, but there's a lot more to deal with him here. Mainly his entire fucking story about defeating Destiny that I can't really go into without major spoilers I'm saving for the end.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So in some respects we could say Biggs is the least developed of all the Avalanche members, but the way his story is told to you is actually the most interesting one to me. So Remake's chapters work in a way where there's kind of like story chapters and then side quest chapters. There is some actual story stuff in the side quest chapters, but typically those chapters are mostly side quests. Anyway, in Chapter 8, a chapter that Biggs doesn't even appear in, we get to talk to these people in an orphanage that actually talk about Biggs a lot because he was really important to them. And what's cool about that is that they don't even know that Cloud knows Biggs, so we're just learning about him. Getting back to Cloud, because I sidetracked for a bit, within those seizures, it's shown to us that who he's seeing is parts of Sephiroth. The one seen in Chapter 1 is just a black feather, which if you know the story, you know it's Sephiroth. So, you kind of think they're trying to mystify it, really build up to it. And then Chapter 2... And I'll be honest, I think it's about time I get into the change of the Sephi boy, because, oh man, that is the length of his sword. So the original Final Fantasy VII, the whole way through, is at its core a chase story where the cast barely even saw the man they were chasing. It made Sephiroth into a mystery and an idea more than a human. The first time we'd even see him was in a flashback at Calm, which was the first city after Midgar. It was here that we'd see his humanity, but we saw that humanity transform into a force. Sephiroth lost any conscience he had and only exists as a power to achieve a goal now, which meant the original game had 2 core ideas for Sephiroth. The mystery for the party to chase, and also to be an unstoppable force. So here's where 7R reached the first big intrinsic roadblock. Sephiroth does not work as a mystery anymore. It's not possible to be mystified by Sephiroth when he's appeared in Kingdom Hearts, Itadaki Street, the H3 World of Final Fantasy, and the list goes on. He's been a costume for fucking Sackboy. You're not mysterious when you're on goddamn Sackboy. And I really want to delve into this because I've seen some people make the argument that Nomura's a hack that blew the Sephiroth load too early. But was there ever even a Sephiroth load to blow. The mystery of Sephiroth has been dead for years, so to fix that, Nomura and his team decided fuck it, and they cranked the self-serving hurricane of a nature up to 30. Anytime you see Sephiroth in this game, he is just a fucking menace. Those dead goddamn eyes, that long silver hair, that long goddamn sword, the fact that he's 6'2" and Cloud's a goddamn manlet, that makes him imposing, jeez. I'll talk a lot more about Sephiroth at the end because, of course, he'll be relevant there. But I'll be honest, the biggest shock Sephiroth related for me was that he is actually the final boss. Yeah, that sounds a little weird, but during Chapter 2 when I first saw him, one of my thoughts was, wow, this is an FF7 game that won't end with a Sephiroth fight, which I guess in some respects we can call subversion. I'm not going to state that the changes to Sephiroth are better or worse than his depiction in the original, rather, they just didn't really have any other options for what to do with him. And while I might have implied that the mystery aspect of him is gone, it's really just that mystery, because trust me, we got a whole goddamn new one. I know I've already talked about this a lot, so it's not shocking when I say this, but character is probably the best thing 7R has going for it. Now, while I'm the last person to say that a game needs voice acting to tell a good story, it certainly fucking makes the job easier. Yeah, every Jumble Jamble in the game is fully voiced to the toppest of notches, whether they're a main character or a two-liner on their way to the B-liner after the lines were two'd. I'll be honest, some of the minor voice actors confused me on Twitter a bit because they hyped up their roles, fooling me into thinking they were mainstays, when in fact they were barely stay. For a bit I thought maybe those VAs overhyped themselves, but then I thought about it and realized I'd probably tattoo the name of the character I voiced on my ballsack if I gave the equivalent of a Roblox effect in FF7. As far as the main cast goes, I'd say they've nailed their character beyond my expectations. I've already talked about Cloud quite a bit, so we can skip that. But Barrett, goddamn, he is now portrayed as a goddamn preacher for the live stream instead of just fist bumpy McAngry model. Even better than that is every moment he's with his daughter, he is just the best fucking dad. Sure, he ditches her a lot, but I bet he takes her for ice cream afterwards. Now Aerith, damn, they have fixed her up. Now with Aerith, one thing they've done is really make her street know-how a bit more evident.
Shit.
Aerith isn't just our perfect Disney princess anymore. Now she's a street-smart woman that gets anything the heck she wants. And she's dressed like a Disney princess. And while I do say that, I realized this on my replay of the original, most of her lines are verbatim the original spelling. And that goes for a lot of the cast, mainly Barrett, but Aerith's lines were easy to reinterpret, which let some of her more candid characteristics get lost in translation from paper to head. It's like how you don't read Shakespeare. But that's because Shakespeare reads like he wrote it with hooves or some shit, and okay, yeah, you know what, this comparison just does not fucking work. What I'm trying to say is that the characters in this game have an extra dimension added to them because of the voice acting, which is saying a whole goddamn lot considering the main cast were already ahead of the gaming curve when it came to character writing. Now once we get to rounding off the entire main cast, we have a little bit of an issue. So here's the thing. I have nothing actually bad to say about Tifa. However, I don't have anything particularly good to say about her that is actually smart. All of my good things are purely for my oof, ouchie, my heart type level. I guess the main thing with Tifa is that similar to me, she's gotten a lot hornier over the years. Now earlier I mentioned that Cloud's an antisocial dip and whenever he talks with Tifa he's really awkward. But yeah, Tifa's about just as fucking bad. Like damn, all she wants to do is touch that spiky little man's ass and oof, boy, I don't like these conversations. She ain't just going one way either, cause oh my fucking lord, I feel like any goddamn minute she's just gonna grab Aerith and make out with her. The way I see it, there has to be a three-way somewhere in this series. Here's the thing, I'm not just saying this cause, you know, the game did Tifa wrong or something. Tifa just didn't really do a lot when you were in Midgar. Pretty much all of her character development was later in the game. I mean, she's still strong and independent, though, like I said, a lot hornier. But you know what, she just makes me fucking happy, so 9 out of 10. As well as the main cast and the side characters that are now basically main cast, there's a plethora of other characters that have been fixed up like Elmira, Don Corneo, President Shinra, and probably a few others I'm blanking on. But I just wanted to give an example of the characters they expanded upon the most cleanly, because what I'd rather get into are a few new characters that were borrowed from the compilation. So the two main examples are Leslie and Kyrie that had their origins in The Kids Are Alright, a Turk side story. It was a part of the compilation that gets forgotten often, like the On the Way to a Smile and its companion OVA OVA episode Denzel. Except, Kids Are Alright has little bearing on the rest of the compilation. It was never even translated to English until early 2019, and that's probably because Square Enix realized they should have an English version of the book available for people after Remake comes out. Honestly, I don't know if their stories there have anything to do with what we have here, so I'll pretend they exist somewhat vacuum to this game. Leslie is the one you'll deal with more in the main quest because most of Chapter 14's mandatory bits are spent dealing with his plotline. However, his introduction is during Chapter 9, where he's a guard for Don Corneo that betrays him for an unexplained reason. And in Chapter 9, he's woven into the story with no hiccups besides the part where I want to beat the fuck out of him. But then his story in Chapter 14 is the part of the game I'd say is the most guilty of padding. And here's the thing, Leslie's story is actually a cool one. He worked for Don Corneo, but then after Corneo picked his fiancée as his bride, she disappeared. So now he wants revenge on Corneo. What leads me to liking it less is because Chapter 14 is a trek through an area we're already familiar with, a sewer no less, with a chase scene towards the stupid fucking rat that hides from us.
Rats, we are the rats.
Just to learn that the chase was just to get his stolen pendant, so he tells them his backstory. Which just makes me think about how this could have been divulged to us in literally any other way. Not like, hey, why couldn't he have told us here instead? But rather, why would they write in a chase scene like this? It leaves a bad taste for me when the rest of Chapter 14 is one of my favorite chapters. It's a moment where a poor gameplay element is detrimental to my view of this character, which makes me hope he reappears as the Remake series continues, because I do hate that I have a view as petty as this one. Alright, positives now. Kyrie is a lot different. So besides one scene that's more about showing how Barrett is racist towards Wutai, which is an unneeded character trait that'll inevitably get in the way of any interesting dynamic between him and Yuffie, Kyrie's story is 800% optional. In actuality, her story starts long before you meet her, because we have some side quests we can do for her grandmother, Muriel. She's kinda just a fun old lady that doesn't want to deal with those capitalist fucks from the upper plate. Now the impetus for continuing Kyrie's story comes once Muriel tells us some young tramp stole the key to Don Corneo's treasure, and then a second raison d'etre is when she steals a wallet from promoted extra Johnny, who we'll talk about in a bit. Pretty much, Kyrie just needs us to beat the shit out of some dudes that she stole wallets from. And where is that?
Why, in the arena, of course!
Now the way that works is, Kyrie's stuff happens during Chapter 14, which besides Leslie's sewer adventure, is all side quests. Luckily, since it's the last side quest chapter in the game, we're capable of freely exploring all the underplate segments of Midgar with some chocobo taxis we find. And then once we're done with her quest, we return her to the church that Aerith usually hangs out to have Granny come in and scold her in the most angry Granny of ways.
Learn to wipe your own ass before you start rooting around in other people's shit.
Less for being a thief, but more for just being a lousy one, because she herself has been a Robin Hood type since her youth. And after skimming a fan translation of the Turkside story on a site I won't name to avoid getting C&D'd, I got to learn that Kyrie was a friend of Aerith's growing up, and that Granny was the one who raised her after her parents were killed in a robbery gone wrong. Then at some point Kyrie got into a fight with Aerith and hasn't talked to her for a while, which adds a weight to both Aerith's relationship with Muriel and Kyrie's placement in the church. I somewhat wish this was explored on in the game itself, but I suppose some things you should leave for the novel. Anyway, I don't want to spend too much longer just talking about characters, but I think I'd be well deserving of a bullet to the dick if I ignored everyone's bro,
Hey Cloud, bro. I can call you bro, right?
Nope.
Johnny. So in the PS1 game, he was someone you could potentially not even learn the name of, but now he's a radtastic dude voiced by best Spider-Man himself, Yuri Lowenthal. And I gotta say, he certainly does make becoming a Spider-Man villain sound mighty fucking appealing. He shows up a few times, typically in the side quest chapters, to get his brosif Cloud to help him out with things that he usually thinks will get him towards the horizontal happy dance with Tiffany. I think he's a fun fucking guy, and for all the jokes I can make about him, it's just fun. And really, there's so many other characters I'd love to talk about, like Madam N, Marlboro Man, Rosh, Moggy, and so much more. But I don't want to just make this Final Fantasy VII characters video. I've got other things here. So one of the things I was worried about was how the game was going to handle its minigames. The original FF7 had a lot of these. You'd get one like every 3 hours. Their point was to keep the player from being exhausted from dungeons and random encounters. But here's the thing, it wasn't just that Final Fantasy VII had a lot of minigames, it's that it had a lot of good minigames. Sure, 9 had a lot too, but Chocobo Hot and Cold and Kina's frog catching are some of the weakest parts of that goddamn game. And the reason I bring this up is because newer Final Fantasies aren't the best when it comes to having minigames, mainly looking at 12, 13, and Lightning Returns. And I can safely say that Remake delivers on having a shit ton of these guys. Some are even my favorite moments of the game. Well, then there's also this fucking robot hand part that can potentially be the worst single moment in this fucking game. And if you do something wrong, you'll have a faster time just exiting and restarting. And what's even worse about it is that it's in the same chapter as Wall Market, which is my favorite chapter of the game. So if you want to replay some of the best parts in the game, you gotta redo. Now here's the thing, the rest of the minigames range from bombastically fun, downright comedic.
Alpha level security disengaged.
That was great, you guys. Let's keep it up.
And then there's these goddamn darts. I'm having so much fucking fun, but all of my friends got this in 3 tries or less, and I don't know how they goddamn did it. When it comes to the future installments, I'm really hoping that once they make it to the Golden Saucer, all of the minigames reappear there and have some kind of expansion to them. I 800% adore the dancing minigame with Andrea Rodea, and if we could get like 5 tracks in the Golden Saucer, I'd lose my goddamn shit. Well, I think it's time I stop square dancing around the big subject about why I've dubbed this a remaking of Final Fantasy VII. So back in Chapter 2, when Cloud first meets Aerith for the first time after the first reactor explodes, their interaction takes a ginormous change. These ghastly looking creatures show up to divert Aerith and Cloud's attention before they can interact with each other a bit more, which also leads to an ambush on Cloud by the Shinra guards. And I gotta say, I completely forgot that this scene where Cloud fights all these guards happens, because in the original game it was like 3 dudes, well now it's most of Chapter 2. And back to the ghastly creatures, at first I kinda thought they were just a sluttily loose adaptation of the Sephiroth clones, but the later appearance of an actual Sephiroth clone proved that that is not the case. Their next act occurs on the same day Avalanche planned to attack the Sector 5 bombing. Unlike in the original, Barrett didn't rehire Cloud for this mission, and on that same day those ghouls injure Catfish McSmack to keep her from joining them, causing Barrett to have Cloud replace her. And so then there's a few hours of gameplay where you bomb in Sector 5, which then leads to their third and most you better fucking get it by now appearance after Cloud falls into the Sector 5 church, where they stop Cloud from killing Reno, and then also stop Aerith from falling a floor and a half to her death. Given how Reno and Aerith are supposed to live through this scene, it was a pretty big fucking hinto to me that these ghouls are trying to ensure the game sticks close enough to the PS1 game's outline. It's not actually revealed until later, but these guys are known as the Whispers, though their more professional title seems to be
Arbiters of Fate.
They only appear one more time before the final act, and that's when Avalanche tries to stop the Sector 7 plate from dropping. At this point, Jesse and Biggs are actually pretty close to not dying, but the Whispers get in the way of both them and Cloud, who almost saves them. They also attempt to stop Wedge from living, but they fail, which is the first sign that stopping them is possible. And thanks to Wedge's survival, he's able to evacuate more of Sector 7 than made it out in the original game. And this is a little interesting bit that I found, is that despite Wedge not helping Sector 7 in the original game, the Whispers don't bother to affect what's happening there. Thing is, in actuality, it's never confirmed how many people died in the PS1 game since Cloud's party didn't see it, besides an unseen part with Aerith that's now playable in Remake. And what this is telling me is that the Whispers only actually care about what happens to affect Cloud's party, but if I'm going to be a little bit more specific, only Aerith and Sephiroth. Reasoning for this, back during the first scene, only Aerith could see the Whispers, but once she made contact with Cloud, once you reach the final Shinra base, the Whispers become significantly more prevalent. They're keeping a close watch on Aerith and Sephiroth to keep them from fucking up fate. It's this part of the game when Cloud and the main cast learn the truth about them in Aerith's old room when Red 13 explains it to them. Though, it was after Aerith did some like Goku mind shit to him, so it's unclear if he previously held this knowledge. And my reason for not talking about Red 13 just about at all in this video is because honestly he doesn't do much. He'll be a lot more prevalent in part 2. Now on the ghouls, the remake in the title of this game isn't just for marketing. All of the characters are in a new timeline, recreating the events of the original game. But only Sephiroth knows everything, and Aerith either knows everything, or at the very least has a foggy idea of what's happening. A scene that a lot of people are throwing out as undeniable proof that Aerith knows what's up is one before the final act, where Aerith requests Cloud not to fall in love with her. Now there's a few issues with this. First is that it's an optional scene that honestly I didn't even know was there at first. I got Tifa, so they could just up and say this scene never happened if they want to. But also, the Aerith whom Cloud speaks to could have very well not been the real Aerith. Because at that time, Aerith was kidnapped, and so it was kind of like a live stream illusion. So, you know, this could be Sephiroth, we don't know. Now, majority of the Shinra Tower chapter goes pretty much the same as the original. The big shift in the story comes right here, when Cloud's gang meets up with a still living President Shinra. In the original, by the time they found him, he was already dead. But this time, they have a pretty good long conversation with the president before Sephiroth kills him, right before their very eyes. And following that, Barret gets impaled and a fight against Jenova Dreamweaver happens. And this fight's pretty fun, but all my friends swear that this is like the best fight in the game, and I'm gonna be totally honest, fucking poison everywhere and the regrowing tentacles got on my nerves really goddamn quick. But whatever, I liked Hell House, so I think my boss-related opinions were revoked a while ago. Now after the battle, the Whispers heal Barret, as he's not actually meant to die today. This sort of raised a question for me about why I should be worried for anyone going forward, but that's gonna get answered pretty fucking soon. After that fight with the Dreamweaver Jenova, Cloud races up towards Sephiroth to learn he's actually a Sephiroth clone who throws himself and Jenova off the building, while the Whispers just don't try to stop any of it despite this scene not happening in the original game. Which means that Sephiroth has either mastered control of the Whispers, or the Whispers don't consider this an important action against Destiny. So after all that Fate Stay shit, the game shifts back to the original storyline with Cloud facing Rufus, while Barret, Red, and Aerith fight that one mecha. The Rufus fight, I'm gonna say right now, is my favorite fight in the whole game, because it really requires you to have mastered everything Cloud's got, or else you're gonna get a As it goes on, the story progresses the same as usual, but with an extra order of crazy added in. And it's at this point in the original that the gang would have escaped Midgar and the game would have truly begun. However, once they mosey to the exit of the city, Sephiroth appears as the Whispers create a giant biodome over Midgar, during which Cloud sees a vision of Zack during the ending of Crisis Core, which shows the Whispers doing the same thing then. Since that dome's in the way, Sephiroth cuts through the Whispers and challenges the group to face him past a portal that Aerith explains as the Road to Freedom. So in the original game, the Road to Freedom represented the start of the actual game, but in Remake, she means that once they cross this portal, they'll find freedom from their destiny. Who you fight past here is the Whispers themselves and Sephiroth. I'm gonna throw my own theory. I think the Whispers were actually a part of Sephiroth and should have never existed in this reality to begin with. Alright, first let's talk about Sephiroth. As we know by this point, he's completely aware that this is a remake, a new universe. While not confirmed as of now, I've interpreted that Sephiroth and Aerith are the two aware of what's up because they were a part of the life stream in the old universe. However, by the time Crisis Core ended, Sephiroth was already a part of the life stream. You might start to think, wait a minute, but Sephiroth is trying to change Destiny. Yeah, he is. But also, just about everything went according to Sephiroth's plan, besides Holy getting called. He got the Black Materia, he had the Jenova reunion, he killed President Shinra, hugged Mumsy, literally everything went right besides that goddamn Holy spell. Well, why does Sephiroth make the Whispers at all if he just needs to kill Aerith earlier then? Simple. He has no control over Cloud, but Aerith has sway over him. Now here's the thing, Cloud had Jenova cells injected into him right after Sephiroth was thrown into the life stream, but I kind of think there was probably some kind of incubation period on when Sephiroth fell in there and when he became a part of it, which means that Cloud probably got those Jenova cells put into him before Sephiroth was a part of the life stream, which means no matter what Sephiroth does, Cloud is going to find his way to Sephiroth. Therefore, Sephiroth's best option is to have everything go as it should, but then stop Aerith from ever making it to the altar to cast Holy. Now there are a few other things he could do to help himself, like prevent Rufus from finishing the Sister Ray or have Cloud join his side, which he does actually offer to him after the fight against him, but realistically, Sephiroth's plan succeeds whether he's alive or not. Now wrapping up what happens in the actual game itself and not my theories, Cloud and the gang defeat the Whispers, thereby defeating Destiny, and during that fight, another support for my theory happens, because three of the Whispers we fight are these Whisper Knights called Rubrum, Viridi, and Croceo. Now these three have the fighting styles based on the three remnants of Sephiroth from Advent Children, and as much as I hated that storyline from Advent Children, for the planet to conjure something like this, they'd need to be aware of the going-ons of Advent Children, which brings us back to Sephiroth. It's my belief that Sephiroth possesses all of the knowledge he would have had at the end of Advent Children. After Cloud and Sephiroth fight in Advent Children, Sephiroth stated,
"I will never be a memory."
Now, I used to always assume that this was just a cool line, but now I think it's been reinterpreted to mean that he's actually gone back in time to when he was in the life stream. However, the rules must work where he can only go back to when he was crystallized, which is why he can't do anything about Cloud. A looser piece of evidence for my theory is that the fight against Sephiroth has a lot of visual cues from Advent Children, mainly the terrain, but the big fucking black wing is actually an important one. So in the original game, the Sephiroth you'd interact with until the end was actually Jenova's body with Sephiroth's spirit imprinted onto her. Up until this point in Remake, we've actually been interacting with other Sephiroth clones with his will imprinted on them, but at this point, it seems as though it's the Jenova Sephiroth. The reason I say that now is because Sephiroth's human body never had the black wing in the original FF7. But since Sephiroth is choosing Jenova's form, he can do whatever the fuck he wants, hence the black wing. Now, the things I'm not going to give any fucking guesses about is after the fight ends. It's here when Sephiroth transports Cloud to what seems to be the end of time or the brink of the universe, and he requests that he joins him.
Join me,
Cloud.
Obviously he refuses because he's the main character, but once that happens, Sephiroth tells him that he has 7 seconds until the end, which yeah, there's just no fucking chance I can analyze this. After that, the party leaves Midgard to truly start what the game calls the unknown journey. And at the same time, we also see that Zack survives his final stand where he was meant to die. Maybe. It's not totally clear if this scene is actually the same universe, or if it's some third universe that will come into play later. Final Fantasy VII Remake. Something I waited a decade for. I'll be honest, when I first beat this thing, I was kinda heartbroken. The story I know is about to be changed beyond belief. But then I thought about it. What would be my thought process if I beat Rufus, did the motorcycle, and the game ended there? I'm sure I would have loved it, but I wouldn't have been engaged in the saga. I'd just think, yep, when's the next one so I can do more of what I know? Here? I don't know what I'm doing in part 2. Yeah, I have a general idea, and honestly I don't think too much will change if it doesn't help Sephiroth's plan, but I would have not given you that long fucking theory of mine. Now I'm invested again, and honestly, I think that's what needed to happen. Not just to make Final Fantasy VII relevant again, but remakes as well. Sure, it's nice to have a remade game that we know the gist of, but how engaged are we once we finish it? Me personally, I just go back to thinking about the old one. And then there's also the question, well, why did they do it with Final Fantasy VII? Well, would you give a fucking shit if 3D World Runner got a goddamn Evangelion remake? No, of course you wouldn't. This was the literal biggest game of its genre. People are gonna take notice on this. New fans and old ones. And that's the main goal with a remake. And even more than that, I think it's kind of what Final Fantasy needed right now.